I never thought a quilt could destroy everything I believed about my family. But there it was, folded carefully on my mother's porch at 4 in the morning, placed there by a stranger who knew more about us than we knew about ourselves. My name is Sarah. I'm 42 years old. And until 3 weeks ago, I thought I understood my life. I thought I knew where I came from. I thought the stories my mother told me, the photos in our albums, the memories we shared, were real. I was wrong. It started on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were my day to visit Mom. She lived alone in the house I grew up in, a small craftsman cottage on Maple Street, in a town so quiet you could hear your own thoughts. Dad had passed 5 years earlier, and Mom, well, she seemed smaller every time I saw her. Not just physically. It was like she was fading, piece by piece, into the wallpaper of that old house. That morning, I pulled into her driveway just after dawn. I liked coming early, before the day got away from us, before her friends called, before her shows came on, before the world demanded her attention. Those early hours were ours. But something was different that day. There was a quilt on the porch, a handmade quilt, the kind you see at craft fairs or estate sales. It was folded into a perfect square and placed directly in front of the door, like someone had positioned it with intention, like someone wanted it found. I picked it up. It was heavy, made from what looked like dozens of different fabrics, florals and plaids and solids, all stitched together in a pattern that seemed random but somehow wasn't. And pinned to the top was a small envelope, yellowed paper, my mother's name written in careful cursive. I should have knocked on the door right then. I should have shown it to her, asked if she was expecting something, asked if she knew who would leave such a thing. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there on that porch, holding that quilt, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a strange pull in my chest, a whisper in the back of my mind that said, "Open it, read it, before she wakes up, before she can explain it away." So I did. I slipped the note from the envelope, and I read 6 words that would crack my world wide open. 6 words written in that same careful cursive. She was never yours to keep. What did that mean? Who was never hers to keep? And why was I suddenly terrified to find out? I stood there frozen, reading those words over and over until they stopped making sense. She was never yours to keep. Never yours to keep. Never yours. I never thought a quilt could destroy everything I believed about my family. But there it was, folded carefully on my mother's porch at 4 in the morning, placed there by a stranger who knew more about us than we knew about ourselves. My name is Sarah. I'm 42 years old. And until 3 weeks ago, I thought I understood my life. I thought I knew where I came from. I thought the stories my mother told me, the photos in our albums, the memories we shared, were real. I was wrong. It started on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were my day to visit Mom. She lived alone in the house I grew up in, a small craftsman cottage on Maple Street, in a town so quiet you could hear your own thoughts. Dad had passed 5 years earlier, and Mom, well, she seemed smaller every time I saw her. Not just physically. It was like she was fading, piece by piece, into the wallpaper of that old house. That morning, I pulled into her driveway just after dawn. I liked coming early, before the day got away from us, before her friends called, before her shows came on, before the world demanded her attention. Those early hours were ours. But something was different that day. There was a quilt on the porch, a handmade quilt, the kind you see at craft fairs or estate sales. It was folded into a perfect square and placed directly in front of the door, like someone had positioned it with intention, like someone wanted it found. I picked it up. It was heavy, made from what looked like dozens of different fabrics, florals and plaids and solids, all stitched together in a pattern that seemed random but somehow wasn't. And pinned to the top was a small envelope, yellowed paper, my mother's name written in careful cursive. I should have knocked on the door right then. I should have shown it to her, asked if she was expecting something, asked if she knew who would leave such a thing. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there on that porch, holding that quilt, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a strange pull in my chest, a whisper in the back of my mind that said, "Open it, read it, before she wakes up, before she can explain it away." So I did. I slipped the note from the envelope, and I read 6 words that would crack my world wide open. 6 words written in that same careful cursive. She was never yours to keep. What did that mean? Who was never hers to keep? And why was I suddenly terrified to find out? I stood there frozen, reading those words over and over until they stopped making sense. She was never yours to keep. Never yours to keep. Never yours. My hands were shaking. The quilt felt heavier now, like it carried weight beyond fabric and thread. I looked down at it again, really looked, and that's when I noticed something I'd missed before. Stitched into one of the squares, so small I almost didn't see it, was a date, June 14th, 1983. My birthday. Well, not exactly my birthday. My birthday is June 16th, but close enough to make my stomach turn. I heard movement inside the house. Mom was awake. I could hear her slippers shuffling across the hardwood floor, hear the familiar sound of her morning routine beginning. In about 30 seconds, she'd open that door and find me standing here with this quilt and this note and questions I wasn't sure I wanted answers to. I made a choice, maybe the wrong one. I folded the note back into the envelope, tucked it into my jacket pocket, and draped the quilt over my arm like it was the most natural thing in the world. The door opened. Mom stood there in her robe trope, her silver hair still pressed flat from sleep, her reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She smiled when she saw me, that same warm smile she'd given me every day of my life. "Sarah, honey, you're early," she said, her voice still rough with sleep. Then her eyes landed on the quilt. "What's that you've got there?" "I found it on the porch," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Was someone supposed to drop something off?" Her face changed, just for a second, just a flicker of something. Fear, maybe? Recognition? It passed so quickly I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. "On the porch," she repeated, reaching out to touch the fabric. Her fingers trembled slightly. "That's strange. I wasn't expecting anything." "Do you know what it is?" I asked, watching her carefully. She pulled her hand back like the quilt had burned her. No, I don't know. Probably just someone dropping off donations for the church sale. You know how people are. They leave things at the wrong house all the time." But she was lying. I could tell. I'd known this woman for 42 years, and I knew when she was lying. The way her left eye twitched slightly, the way she touched her throat, the way she wouldn't quite meet my gaze. "Mom," I said slowly, "there's a date stitched into this quilt, June 14th, 1983. The color drained from her face. 2 days before I was born. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, and then she said the words that confirmed everything I was afraid of. "Sarah, honey, I think you should come inside. We need to talk." I followed her into the house, my legs moving on autopilot while my mind raced through every possible explanation. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe someone made a quilt for a baby born around the same time as me. Maybe the date meant something else entirely. But I knew better. Deep down, I knew. Mom walked straight to the kitchen and put the kettle on. Her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. She didn't look at me, just kept her back turned, filling the kettle, placing it on the stove, adjusting the flame even though it was already perfect. "Mom," I said quietly, "what's going on?" She gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles white. For a long moment she didn't speak. The only sound was the tick-tick-tick of the gas flame and the beginning whistle of the kettle heating up. "I always knew this day might come," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I prayed it wouldn't." My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "What day? What are you talking about?" She turned around then, and I saw tears streaming down her face. My mother, who never cried, who stayed strong when Dad died, who held our family together through every crisis, who always knew exactly what to say and when. She was falling apart right in front of me. "The quilt," she said, gesturing toward where I'd laid it on the table. It's from her." "From who?" She closed her eyes, took a breath, and then she said it. "From your birth mother." The world tilted sideways. I grabbed the back of a chair to steady myself. Birth mother. Those words didn't make sense, couldn't make sense, because I wasn't adopted. I had a birth certificate, I had baby photos, I had stories about the day I was born, about how Dad passed out cigars at the hospital, about how Mom's labor lasted 14 hours. "No," I said. "No, that's not... You're my mother. You gave birth to me. I've seen the pictures." "Those pictures are real, Sarah, but they're not of you." I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. "What?" Mom moved to the table and sank into a chair, suddenly looking 20 years older. "They're pictures of your brother, of Michael. He was born 2 years before you. He only lived 3 days. I'd never heard this name before. Michael, a brother I never knew existed. I don't understand," I whispered. She reached across the table and took my hand. Hers was ice cold. "When we lost Michael, it broke something in me, in both of us. Your father and I, we tried for years after that to have another baby, but it never happened. The doctor said it probably wouldn't, and I fell into a darkness I couldn't climb out of." The kettle was screaming now, but neither of us moved. Then one day, a woman came to our door. She was young, maybe 19 or 20, pregnant, alone. She'd heard through a friend of a friend that we'd lost a baby, and she had nowhere else to go. My voice cracked when I spoke. "And that woman was your mother," she said, squeezing my hand tighter. "Your real mother. And Sarah, honey, she didn't just give you to us. She lived with us for 3 months, right here in this house. And when you were born..." She couldn't finish, but she didn't have to. Because suddenly, I understood why someone would leave a quilt on the porch at dawn, why they write those 6 terrible words, why everything I thought I knew about my life was about to come crashing down. Somewhere out there was a woman who'd been looking for me for 42 years, and now she'd found me. The kettle was still screaming. Mom finally stood up and turned off the stove, but she didn't pour the water. She just stood there with her back to me, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My entire body felt numb, like I was watching this happen to someone else. "Why didn't you tell me?" I finally managed to ask. She turned around, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her bathrobe. "Because we loved you. Because the moment you were born, you became ours. Because she asked us not to." "She asked you not to tell me?" Mom nodded slowly. "She was so young, Sarah. Scared. Alone. Her family had kicked her out when they found out she was pregnant. The father wanted nothing to do with her. She had no money, no job, nowhere to go. We took her in. We gave her a safe place to have her baby. And in return, she gave us you." I looked down at the quilt still sitting on the table. All those different fabrics, all those careful stitches. She made this? She started it the day she moved in with us, worked on it every night. She said it was a way to put a piece of herself into something you'd always have, even if you didn't know it came from her. But I never had it. I never even knew it existed. Mom's face crumpled again. "Because I hid it. The day you were born, June 16th, she held you for exactly 1 hour. Just 1 hour. She kissed your forehead, wrapped you in that quilt, and then she handed it to me. She told me to keep you warm, to keep you safe, to give you the life she couldn't. And then she left. She just left? She walked out of the hospital and we never saw her again. She didn't even stay long enough for them to discharge her. Just gone. Like she'd never existed. Except for the quilt. She left the quilt with a note that said to give it to you when you were old enough to understand. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. And when exactly did you plan on doing that, Mom? When I was 18, 30, 50? When was I supposed to be old enough? I don't know, she cried out. I don't know, Sarah. Every year that passed, it got harder. You were my daughter. You called me Mom. You looked at me like I hung the moon. How was I supposed to tell you that I wasn't, that you weren't? Wasn't what? Wasn't really yours? She flinched like I'd slapped her. You were always mine. From the moment I held you, you were mine. I grabbed the quilt and the envelope from my pocket. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold them. There's a note pinned to the quilt this morning. Did you know about that? Mom's eyes widened. What? No. I told you I hid the quilt in the attic, in a trunk your father built. No one could have... She stopped mid-sentence. Her face went pale. What? I demanded. What is it? The trunk, she whispered. Last week, I hired someone to help clean out the attic, a girl from the church. She was up there for hours, organizing boxes, sorting through old things. She must have found it. She must have given it to my birth mother, I finished. We stared at each other across the kitchen, the weight of 42 years of secrets pressing down on both of us. And then I heard it, a knock at the front door. Soft, hesitant, like whoever was standing on the other side wasn't sure they should be there at all. Mom and I locked eyes. Neither of us moved. Another knock, louder this time. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was just the need to finally know the truth. I walked to the front door and opened it, and standing on my mother's porch was a woman I'd never seen before, but somehow recognized instantly. She had my eyes, my nose, my hands. She was holding an old photograph, and when she saw me, tears started streaming down her face. "Sarah," she whispered. "Oh my God, Sarah!" I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. I just stood there, staring at this stranger who had my face, who was looking at me like a ghost she'd been haunting her for decades. She was older than I expected, mid-60s maybe. Her hair was gray but thick, pulled back in a loose braid, and her hands were trembling as she held that photograph out toward me. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracking. "I'm so sorry. I know I shouldn't have come. I know I promised I wouldn't. But when I saw the quilt was gone from the attic, when I realized someone had finally found it, I couldn't stay away anymore." Behind me, I heard Mom's footsteps. She appeared at my side, her hand gripping the door frame so tightly her knuckles were white. "Rebecca," Mom breathed. "Rebecca?" Her name was Rebecca. The woman, my birth mother, looked past me to Mom, and something passed between them, something complicated and painful and old. "Dorothy," Rebecca said softly, "I know you hate me. I know what I'm doing breaks every promise I made. But please, please just give me 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." "You have no right," Mom said, but her voice lacked conviction. She sounded tired, defeated. "I know." Rebecca's eyes filled with fresh tears. "I know I don't. But I'm dying, Dorothy. Stage 4 lung cancer. 6 months, maybe less. And I can't leave this world without seeing her one more time, without telling her the truth." The air left my lungs. Dying. She was dying. I found my voice, though it came out rough and strange. What truth? What else could there possibly be? Rebecca looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw so much pain in her eyes that I almost couldn't bear it. "Can I come in? Please?" I stepped aside before I could think better of it, before Mom could protest. Rebecca walked past me into the house, moving slowly, like every step hurt. She probably thought I'd slammed the door in her face. Maybe I should have. We ended up back in the kitchen, the three of us sitting around the same table where I'd learned I was adopted just minutes ago. The quilt sat between us, like a fourth person, a witness to everything. Rebecca placed the photograph face down on the table. She was gathering courage, I realized, preparing herself. "The night I left the hospital," she began, "I walked 17 blocks in the rain. I didn't have a car, didn't have money for a bus. I just walked and walked until I couldn't walk anymore. And then I sat down on a bench outside a church, and I cried until I thought I'd die from it." She paused, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "A priest found me there, Father Michael. He brought me inside, gave me tea, let me talk, and I told him everything. About you, Sarah, about giving you away, about the family who'd taken me in when I had nowhere else to go, about how grateful I was and how destroyed I was all at the same time." Mom was crying quietly now, too. I sat frozen, barely breathing. "He asked me one question, just one. He said, 'Did you tell them everything?' And I..." Rebecca's voice broke completely. "I said no, because I hadn't. I hadn't told Dorothy and James everything. I'd kept one secret, one terrible secret that I thought would be easier for everyone if it just stayed buried." My heart was pounding. What secret? Rebecca finally flip-folded the photograph and slid it across the table to me. It was a picture of two teenage girls. They couldn't have been more than 16. They were standing in front of a house with their arms around each other, laughing at something outside the frame. One of them had dark hair and dark eyes. The other one looked exactly like my mother. I looked up at Rebecca, confused. Then I looked at Mom. Her face had gone completely white. "I don't understand." Rebecca's voice was a barely whisper. "The girl on the last, that's me. And the girl on the right is my sister," Mom finished, her voice hollow. "Oh God, Rebecca, no!" Everything stopped. Time, breath, thought. Rebecca nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Dorothy. I'm so sorry. But Sarah deserves to know. She was never just the baby we agreed to give you. She was never just some stranger's child that you adopted." She turned to me, and I saw my whole world reflected in her eyes. "Sarah, you're Dorothy's niece. Your father, your biological father, was Dorothy's brother." The words didn't register at first. They bounced off my brain like stones skipping across water, never quite sinking in. Dorothy's brother, my uncle, my father. "No," I heard myself say. "No, that can't be." But even as I said it, pieces were clicking into place. Things I'd never questioned before suddenly glowing like warning signs in my memory. The way Mom never talked about her family, how we never visited relatives on her side, the few times I'd asked about grandparents or aunts or uncles, and she'd simply said they'd all passed away, or moved far away, or weren't worth knowing. The silence that followed was suffocating. I couldn't process what I was hearing. My father, my biological father, had killed himself 3 weeks before I was born, never knowing I existed, never knowing Rebecca had been found. "Why?" My voice came out as a broken whisper. "Why didn't you tell him?" Rebecca covered her face with her hands. "Because I asked her not to." "What?" I was so ashamed, she choked out, so broken. "I'd abandoned him, Sarah. I'd run away when he needed me most. And when Dorothy found me, when she told me what my leaving had done to him, I couldn't face him. I told Dorothy I needed time, just a little more time to figure out what to say, how to fix it, how to make things right. But we ran out of time, Mom said flatly. 2 days after I found Rebecca, I got the call. Tommy was gone, and suddenly we had a choice to make. I looked between them, these two women bound together by grief and secrets, and a boy who'd loved the wrong person at the wrong time. Rebecca had nowhere to go, Mom continued. No family, no money, 7 months pregnant with my brother's child. And I couldn't let her disappear again. I couldn't let Tommy's baby be born into nothing. So I brought her home. Your father, James, he didn't know at first, Rebecca said. Dorothy told him I was a friend from school who needed help. It wasn't until I'd been living here for 2 weeks that she told him the truth about Tommy, about everything. You could have thrown you out, I said. He almost did, Mom admitted. We had the biggest fight of our marriage, but then he said something I'll never forget. He said, "This baby didn't choose any of this. This baby is innocent, and if we turn our backs now, we're no better than the people who turned their backs on Tommy." I felt tears running down my face. Dad, my dad, the man who'd raised me, who taught me to ride a bike and helped with my homework and walked me down the aisle at my wedding, he'd known all along. So we made a plan, Mom said. Rebecca would stay here until the baby was born. We'd tell people she was a distant cousin, and after the birth, she would leave, sign the papers, let us adopt you properly, give you the stable life she couldn't provide, and Tommy never got to give you. But the quilt, I said, looking at it still spread across the table, you kept it all these years. Mom nodded. James built a special trunk for it, said every child deserves to know where they came from, even if the timing isn't right. He made me promise that someday, when you were ready, I'd give it to you, tell you everything. But you never did. Because I was a coward, she said simply. Because every year that passed made it harder. Because you were my daughter, Sarah, mine, and I was terrified that if you knew the truth, you'd look at me differently, love me less, leave me like everyone else had left. I stood up, my legs shaky. I walked to the window and stared out at the quiet street, at the ordinary morning happening outside, while my entire world was being rewritten inside. How did you find us, Rebecca? I asked without turning around. After all these years, how? I never stopped watching, she said softly. I left like I promised, but I never stopped checking in. Every few years, I'd drive by just to see the house, see if maybe I'd catch a glimpse of you playing in the yard or getting on the school bus. I never got too close, never let myself be seen, but I watched. That's insane, I said. That's love, she countered quietly. Broken, twisted, inadequate love, but love nonetheless. I turned around, and the girl from the church, the one who cleaned the attic? Rebecca's face flushed. My granddaughter, my daughter's child. I had another baby, Sarah, 5 years after you, married a good man who knew about my past and loved me anyway, built a life, but I never forgot, never stopped thinking about the daughter I gave away. So you sent your granddaughter to spy on us? No, Mom interjected. I asked for help with the attic, put an ad in the church bulletin. I had no idea who she was, no idea Rebecca had stayed in town all this time. I didn't stay, Rebecca said. I moved away, built my life 3 states over. But when I got diagnosed, when the doctors told me I had months instead of years, I came back. I had to come back. And when I saw Dorothy's ad, when I realized my granddaughter could get inside that house, could maybe find what I'd left behind all those years ago, you used her, I said. Yes, Rebecca admitted without hesitation. I used her. I'm not proud of it, but I was desperate. I needed you to know the truth before I died, needed you to understand that giving you up wasn't because I didn't want you. It was because I wanted you to have everything I couldn't give you, everything Tommy would have given you if he'd lived. I looked at this woman, this stranger who was my mother but not my mother, who carried me and birthed me and then walked away, who spent 42 years watching from a distance, loving from the shadows, waiting for a moment that might never come. And I didn't know what I felt. Anger, grief, confusion, connection, all of it swirling together into something I didn't have words for. I need time, I finally said. I need to think, to process. This is too much. Rebecca nodded, standing slowly. Of course, I understand. I shouldn't have come. I needed you to know, before it's too late. I needed you to know that every day of your life, someone was loving you from afar. Someone was proud of you. Someone was grateful you existed. She moved toward the door, then paused. The quilt? It's yours. I made it with fabric from Tommy's old shirts, from dresses I wore when we were together, from pieces of the life we thought we'd have. Every square is a memory. Every stitch is a prayer. And in the lining, if you look carefully, you'll find something else. What? I asked. Letters, she said. One for every year of your life. 42 letters I wrote but never sent. They're stitched into the batting. You'll have to carefully remove the backing to read them, but they're there. They've always been there, waiting for you. And then she left, walked out of the house the same way she'd walked out of the hospital 42 years ago, quietly, without looking back, leaving only pieces of herself behind. Mom and I stood in the kitchen, surrounded by the wreckage of our old life and the uncertain foundation of whatever came next. Are you okay? Mom finally asked. I almost laughed. I don't even know what okay means anymore. She moved toward me hesitantly, like she wasn't sure if I'd pull away. Sarah, I know I should have told you. I know I was wrong. But please understand that everything I did, every choice I made was because I loved you, because I wanted to protect you. I looked at her, really looked at her, at the woman who'd raised me, who taught me to ride a bike and helped with my homework and walked me down the aisle at my wedding, who'd lied to me for 42 years but had also given me everything she had. I know, Mom, I said, and I meant it. I know. We stood there for a long moment, neither of us knowing what to say or do next. And then I looked down at the quilt, at all those carefully stitched pieces of a past I never knew I had. Help me open it, I said. I want to read the letters. Mom's eyes widened. Are you sure? No, I admitted, but I think I need to know. All of it, the whole truth, no more secrets. So we sat back down at that kitchen table, and together we began the careful work of unstitching 42 years of hidden history, of pulling apart the layers between the life I'd lived and the life I'd never known existed. The first letter was dated June 16, 1983, my birthday, the day Rebecca had held me for 1 hour and then walked away forever. It started with 3 words that broke my heart. My dearest Sarah. His name was Tommy, Rebecca said quietly, staring down at her hands. Thomas Richard Henshaw. He was 2 years older than Dorothy, and he was everything to me. Mom made a sound like a wounded animal. She pushed back from the table, her chair clattering to the floor. Stop. Just stop. Mom, I said, but she wasn't listening. You don't get to come into my house and say his name, Mom spat, her voice shaking with rage I'd never heard from her before. You don't get to talk about him like he was some kind of love story. You destroyed him. You destroyed everything. Rebecca absorbed the words like blows, flinching but not fighting back. I know. No, you don't know. Mom was shouting now, years of buried pain erupting all at once. You were 16 years old, Rebecca. 16. He was 18. You were children. And when you told him you were pregnant, when you told him your parents kicked you out, do you know what he wanted to do? I sat there, watching this unfold like a car crash I couldn't look away from. He wanted to marry you, Mom continued, her voice breaking. He wanted to run away with you, get some apartment somewhere, drop out of school, work whatever job he could find. He wanted to keep that baby, keep you. He was ready to throw his entire future away. Rebecca was sobbing openly now. I know he did. And our parents? Our father? Mom had to stop, pressing her mouth to her hand. When she continued, her voice was barely audible. Our father told him if he did that, if he married you and kept that baby, he'd be dead to the family, gone, cut off, no support, no money, no home to come back to, nothing. I felt sick. What happened? Mom looked at me, and I saw a grief so deep it seemed bottomless. Tommy chose you anyway. He chose Rebecca and the baby and the life he wanted to build. He told our father to go to hell, packed a bag, got as far as the driveway. She had to pause again, composing herself. And then our father had a heart attack right there in the living room. Massive. He was dead before the ambulance arrived. Oh my God, I whispered. Tommy blamed himself, Mom said flatly. The guilt ate him alive. And Rebecca left town 3 days after the funeral. Just disappeared. No note, no goodbye, nothing. And Tommy, she couldn't finish. Didn't need to. Rebecca's voice was so quiet I almost didn't hear her. I thought I was helping. I thought if I just went away, if I had the baby somewhere else and gave it up for adoption, Tommy could move on, could have the future he deserved. I thought I was doing the right thing. You were 16, I said, and I didn't know if I was defending her or condemning her. Maybe both. Mom sat back down heavily, like all the fight had drained out of her. I spent 2 years looking for you, for both of you. Tommy fell apart after you left, dropped out of school, started drinking. I was 14 years old and I was watching my brother destroy himself, and I didn't know how to stop it. How did you find her? How did she end up here? Mom and Rebecca exchanged a long look. I hired a private investigator, Mom said finally. Used money from a trust fund our grandmother left us. It took 18 months, but he found her. In a town 4 hours away, pregnant and living in a women's shelter. I was 7 months along when Dorothy showed up. I didn't recognize her at first. She'd grown up so much. But then she said her name and I fell apart. I told her about Tommy, Mom said, her voice hollow, about what the guilt had done to him, how he needed to know she was okay, how he needed to know about the baby. The room went very, very quiet. What did he say? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. When you told him about me? Rebecca and Mom looked at each other again, and this time I saw something that made my blood run cold. We never told him, Mom whispered. What? He died, Sarah, 3 weeks before you were born. Drove his car into a tree at 2 a.m. The police said it was an accident, that he'd been drinking and the roads were wet. She met my eyes, and I saw the terrible truth there. But it wasn't an accident. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about the secrets families keep and the love that survives even the most impossible circumstances, I'd be grateful if you'd take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. Because the truth is, we all carry quilts full of hidden stories. We all have pieces of ourselves stitched into patterns only we can see. And sometimes the bravest thing we can do is unfold them and let the light in. Thank you for listening to Sarah's story. Thank you for being here.